I used to think my life was just bad luck and bad choices. I didn't realize until much later that it was actually a war, and I was growing up on the front line. The first time a gun went off in front of me, I was 9. It was in our kitchen, the one with the broken window and the plastic tablecloth with little strawberries on it. My mother was washing dishes with her hands shaking so hard the plates clinked like teeth. My father stood between 2 men in dark coats, men who smelled like expensive cologne and cold rain. They weren't family, but we called them uncles because in our neighborhood you don't say the word that really fits them. You don't say Mafia, you say they help us, even when they put a gun on your table. The shot wasn't meant for me. It hit the wall a few inches from my head and brick dust rained into my hair. I remember my own scream sounded far away like it belonged to some other girl. One of the men laughed and said, "Relax, it was just a warning." My father nodded like it was nothing, like this was normal, because in a way it was. That night when everyone was asleep, I lifted my shirt in the bathroom mirror and saw a long, thin scratch where the broken brick had caught me. It wasn't deep, but it burned. I touched it and made myself a quiet promise. Nobody would ever see my wounds, not the small ones, not the big ones that came later. The time I was 23, my body was a map of stories I never wanted to tell. A cigarette burn on my thigh from when I spoke too loud. A knife mark near my hip from when a deal went wrong and I was in the wrong car at the wrong time. Finger-shaped bruises that came and went like seasons. I learned very young that dresses could be armor, long sleeves, high necklines, thick fabrics. If I wrapped myself well enough, people would see what I wanted them to see, a normal girl, quiet, useful. Not a girl who belonged to a world where debts were paid in blood. I worked in one of their clubs, officially as a bookkeeper. Unofficially, I kept my mouth shut, my head down, and the numbers clean enough that nobody asked hard questions. The club was beautiful in the way a loaded gun can be beautiful, gold, red velvet, soft light that hid sharp edges. Men in suits laughed too loud. Girls in short dresses walked like they were floating, but their eyes gave them away. Every night I sat in the back office with my ledgers, pretending the walls didn't shake when someone was dragged into the basement. The old boss, Don Marcelo, liked me because I was invisible. I never flirted. I never asked for anything. I remembered everything. When he died suddenly, heart attack, they whispered, though nobody in our world really believes in natural deaths, the air changed. It felt heavier, like the whole city was holding its breath, waiting to see who would take his place. His nephew did. They called him El Lobo behind his back, the wolf, Mateo De Luca. I heard his name for the first time while I was pretending not to listen. "He's not like his uncle," one of the guards muttered near my door. "No patience, no mercy." Another voice replied lower, almost respectful, "No mistakes either." Rumors moved through the club faster than the music, that he'd grown up half in Europe, half in the streets, that he'd cleaned a whole region of traitors in 1 year, that he never repeated an order. You obeyed once or you didn't live long enough to fail twice. The night I met him, I wore my safest dress, dark blue long sleeves, fabric thick enough to feel like a shield. I had been working late, finishing the month's accounts, when the intercom buzzed suddenly. The sound snapped through the quiet and made me flinch so hard my pen tore a hole in the page. My voice came out too small. "Boss wants to see you, now." It was Lewis, one of the older guards. His tone was flat, but I heard something in it, maybe warning, maybe pity. My heartbeat started counting faster than the numbers on my page. In our world, being invited upstairs in the middle of the night could mean anything. A promotion, a punishment, a final conversation. I wiped my hands on my dress and checked my reflection in the dark computer screen. My hair was in its usual low bun, my makeup almost gone, dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a girl who did calculations, not like someone important enough to stand in front of a man like him. Maybe that was my only protection. On the way up, the hallway felt longer than I remembered. The music from downstairs faded until all I could hear were my footsteps and the low hum of the building. 2 men stood outside the top-floor office. They were taller than the door, shoulders stretched tight in their black suits. One of them opened the door without a word, and for a second I thought about running, just turning back, saying I was sick, anything. But you don't run from wolves, you just hope they're not hungry. His office wasn't what I expected. Less gold, more glass. A wide window showed the city lights like a spilled jewelry box. The room smelled like leather and some clean, cold cologne, not the heavy kind the older men used. He stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets, suit perfectly cut to broad shoulders and a body that looked like it knew how to fight. A faint tattoo curled up his neck, disappearing into his hairline. I couldn't see his face, but somehow I felt watched. "Sit," he said without turning. His voice was deep but controlled, not lazy, not cruel, like he weighed every word before letting it out. My knees almost gave out when I reached the chair. I placed the folder of accounts on his desk, careful not to let my hands tremble where he could see. My scars tingled under the fabric as if they knew danger was close. I wrapped my fingers together in my lap, pressing my nails into my skin to stop the shaking. He finally turned around. For a second, all I registered were sharp lines. Jaw, nose, dark brows, a faint scar near his mouth that looked almost like a dimple until you looked closer. His eyes were the kind I hated most, calm, not because they were gentle, but because calm eyes in our world meant someone was used to chaos and no longer surprised by it. He looked younger than I imagined, maybe early 30s, but there was nothing young in the way he watched me. He studied me like I was another report, another risk to calculate. "Your Honor," he said. "Yes, sir," my voice barely rose above a whisper. He picked up the folder, flipped through the pages quickly, then more slowly. Every second stretched like wet cloth. I heard the tick of an expensive watch on his wrist, the faint sounds of the club far below us, my own breath too loud in my ears. "You did all this?" His eyes didn't leave the numbers. "Yes, sir." "And you've been doing it for my uncle how long?" 4 years, almost 5. His gaze lifted to my face then, and it felt like someone had turned a spotlight on me. I forced myself not to look away. Men like him smelled fear the way wolves do. I had learned that the hard way. "You're good," he said finally. "Too good to be working in the back of a nightclub for this salary." His mouth twitched like he might almost smile, but didn't. "Why are you still here?" Heat rose to my cheeks. Nobody in this world asked questions like that without a trap underneath. I swallowed. "My father's debt," I answered, the truth simple and bare. Lying to a man like him felt more dangerous than exposing any of my scars. He nodded once like he'd already known. "So you belong to me now," he said calmly, "until the numbers say otherwise." The words should have scared me more than they did. Belonging here meant you were another asset like a car or a gun, replaceable, breakable, but there was something in his tone I couldn't place, not softness but not cruelty either, like he was stating a fact he didn't entirely enjoy. "Stand up," he said suddenly. My stomach dropped. "Sir." "Stand up." This time his voice was quieter but heavier. "Come here." My legs felt like glass as I rose and stepped around the chair. The room seemed to shrink with every step. When I was in front of his desk, close enough to see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl and my heart pound at the same time, not like a man undressing a woman with his eyes, but like a soldier checking for wounds. "Turn," he gestured with 2 fingers. I froze, old memories flashed, hands pulling, pushing, grabbing, pain, laughter that sounded like a knife being sharpened. My scars burned under the dress, remembering before my mind did. "I'm not going to hurt you, Anna." His voice dropped, softer now, but somehow more dangerous because I wanted to believe it. "Turn." Slowly I did, faced the window, the city lights blurring because my eyes wouldn't stop blinking back the sting. I felt rather than saw him stand up. The air changed when he moved, his presence suddenly closer, warmer. My spine went rigid. He stopped just behind me, not touching, not yet. His breath brushed the back of my neck when he spoke. "Do you think I don't notice things?" he asked quietly. "The way you walk, the way you flinch when someone raises their hand, even to joke, the way you never, ever wear anything that shows your skin." My throat closed. I bit my lip hard enough to taste copper. 1,000 answers crowded at the edge of my tongue, all of them useless. His hand appeared in my peripheral vision, cautious, like he was approaching a wild animal. 2 fingers touched the fabric between my shoulder blades, right where the dress hid the oldest scar, the one that started everything. Even through the cloth, I felt the world tilt. "Who marked you like this?" he asked, voice low and controlled, but trembling at the edges with a rage that was not, for once, aimed at me. "My men, my uncle, someone else." The room went silent. The city outside kept shining, the music downstairs kept playing, but up here everything narrowed to that single point. His fingers over the hidden lines of my past, and the question hanging between us that I had never dared answer out loud. I knew that if I spoke, if I told him the truth, something would break. Inside me, or inside him, or maybe inside the whole bloody world we lived in. But before I could decide whether to lie or to tear myself open, his hand slid slowly along the fabric, following the invisible path of the scar, and I felt the first warm drop of a tear hit my lip. I didn't know if it was mine or his. My body decided for me before my mind did. A sob climbed up my chest and broke out in one ugly, shaking breath. I pressed my lips together to kill the sound, but it was too late. The image I'd spent years building, the quiet girl, the good worker, the one nothing could really touch, cracked right there in front of the most dangerous man I'd ever met. Behind me, his fingers went still on my back. "Turn around," he said softly. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand and forced myself to move. When I faced him, he was closer than I expected, eyes level with mine now, not towering over me like a god. Up close, I saw it, the faint shine on his lower lashes, the way his jaw flexed like he was holding something back that had nothing to do with violence. If that tear had been his, he'd never admit it. Men like him didn't bleed in front of witnesses, not even from the eyes. He studied my face like it held an answer to a question that had been bothering him for years. "Who did it?" he asked again, quieter this time. "Name." My throat closed, I shook my head automatically. "It doesn't matter, it was a long time ago." His expression hardened just a little. "In this world," he said, "nothing is so long ago that it stops mattering." He walked past me, suddenly restless, and circled his desk like a caged animal, then stopped with both hands on the back of his chair. His voice changed, less boss, more man. "Sit, Anna." I obeyed, more out of habit than trust, clutching the edge of the seat. He stayed standing, as if he couldn't bear to sit while talking about something that made him this tense. "You work with numbers," he said, "so you understand balance sheets, debits, credits, consequences." His eyes caught mine. "I took this chair from a man who let a lot of things happen. I need to know what I inherited." I stared at my hands, my fingers twisted together, pressing against the faint raised line of a cut across my knuckle. "You inherited all of it," I murmured. "The money, the fear, the silence." "Name's Anna," he insisted. There was an edge there now, but it wasn't aimed at me. "Start with who first put a mark on your back." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Memories pressed in like hands around my throat. The kitchen, the gun, the first time someone told me I had to pay for my father's mistake with more than numbers. "It was one of Don Marcelo's men," I said finally, each word like pulling out a splinter. "Hector." His fingers tightened on the chair back. I heard the faint crack of leather under his grip. "He supervised collections," I went on, my voice growing flatter as if I were reading from one of my ledgers. "My father owed too much. He started drinking, stopped working. The debt got bigger. Marcelo didn't like writing off losses." I swallowed. "So Hector came to remind us." "How old were you?" Mateo asked. I almost lied. 18. His shoulders rose with one slow breath, and my uncle knew. "Of course he knew," I said, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. "Nothing happened in this building without him, not really." I lifted my eyes to Mateo, anger cutting through the fear for the first time. "You think the blood just appeared on the floor by itself? You think the girls downstairs walk that way because they like it?" For a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. "You don't talk to a boss like that, not if you want to keep your teeth." But he just watched me, something raw passing through his face. Shame, maybe, or a kind of disgust that looked like it was aimed at himself as much as at his uncle. "What did he do to you exactly?" he asked. My shoulders hunched. I felt my body wanting to fold in on itself to disappear. "It's not one thing," I said. "It's a collection like your accounts." I forced the words out, each one scraping my throat. "Once he pushed me against the stove when I tried to get between him and my father. The burn is," I gestured vaguely toward my lower back. "Another time he used his cigarette because I was cooperating. In the car, when they took me to the warehouse the first time, I tried to jump out. The glass cut my leg." He laughed, left it, said scars would remind me to behave. Images flashed, tile floors, cold metal, the sound of a belt being pulled free of loops. I pushed the rest down. Some things were still too deep to dig up, even for a wolf. I told myself if I stayed quiet, if I just did the math, nobody would notice me, that maybe they'd forget I existed. My voice shook. It didn't work. The room went very, very still. For a long moment, the only sound was the small mechanical tick of the clock on the wall. "When was the last time he touched you?" Mateo asked. "Before you came," I said. "He stopped when Marcelo got sick. There were more urgent things to think about, but he still looks at me, like he's waiting to see if the new boss will give him his toys back." A muscle jumped in Mateo's cheek. He straightened slowly, then walked around to his side of the desk and sat, forcing his posture into something controlled. He opened one of the drawers, pulled out a thick envelope and dropped it on the polished wood between us. "Your father's debt," he said, "paid." I blinked. "What?" "This covers everything he owed my uncle with interest. Sign the release tomorrow. I'll have it prepared." His eyes pinned me there. From this moment, no one in this organization has any financial claim on you. Pain flared under my ribs, sharp, confusing. Freedom. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like stepping out of one cage and finding myself in another, bigger one with thicker bars. I can't pay that back, I whispered. Not in 10 years, not ever. I'm not asking you to, he replied. Fear slid cold and slow down my spine. Then why? He exhaled, looking past me for a second toward the city. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Because I watched this world chew up someone I loved, he said. My sister, different story, same teeth. I swore if I ever sat in this chair, I'd do at least one thing different. His gaze returned to me, hard and clear. This is one. My chest tightened. You had a sister. Had, he confirmed, no more details. The words sat between us like a gravestone. I don't want to be a charity case, I said, surprising myself with the force in my own voice. People will talk, they'll say I'm the only one whose opinion counts in this building, he cut in. Let them talk, I decide what's true here. That was the problem, that he could. I swallowed. Then what happens to me now? He studied me for a long moment, like he was turning different futures over in his mind, weighing costs and risks. Now, he said at last, you work for me directly. No one touches you, no one orders you except me. You handle my books, you stay on this floor. If you go downstairs, you do not walk alone, ever, not while Hector is still breathing. The name hit the air like a gunshot. And if I hesitated, if he hears that my debt is gone, he'll think that I gave you something, he'll be angry. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. There was nothing kind in it. He can be angry, Mateo said calmly. He just can't be alive. My blood ran cold. You're going to kill him because of me. I'm going to kill him because men like him survived too long under my uncle, he answered. Because he's a liability, because I don't let rabid dogs walk through my house. His eyes softened just a fraction. You are just the line in the ledger that pushed the decision from soon to now. I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it again. Who was I to argue with the way a mafia boss cleaned his house? Who was I to say a man who had burned and cut me didn't deserve whatever was coming? Still, a tremor of guilt moved through me. I had survived all these years by not being the reason anything happened. Now, suddenly I was. When, I asked, my voice barely more than air. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his face a calm mask that didn't quite hide the storm underneath. Tomorrow, he said, but first. He reached for the phone on his desk, pressing a button. Send Hector up, Mateo ordered, his eyes never leaving mine. And Anna. Yes, my pulse hammered against my skin. Sit right there, he said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. You're going to see exactly what kind of man you work for now. The elevator doors were still closing on Hector's face when my stomach twisted so violently I had to grip the arms of the chair to stay upright. He walked in like he owned the hallway, same swagger, same greasy smile, only to freeze when he saw me sitting across from Mateo's desk. Boss, he'd said, looking from me to Mateo and back again. You called. Now, as the numbers above the door blinked their slow climb to the ground floor, the echo of his confusion hung in the air. The office was quiet again, but the silence felt different, charged, heavy with something I didn't have words for. Mateo hadn't killed him, not yet. Instead, he'd let the moment stretch, then told Hector in a tone that brooked no argument, starting today, you don't go near accounting, you don't speak to Anna, you don't enter any room she's in unless I order it, understood. Hector had tried to hide it, but I saw it, the flash of fear behind his eyes, the stiffness of his jaw when he said, Claro jefe, no problem. Then the dismissal, the calm, that will be all, and the look Mateo gave me as the door closed, a look that said, I'm not finished. Now we were alone again. You did, I started. Not in front of you, he said, cutting me off gently. He sat on the edge of his desk, not behind it, closing some invisible distance between us. You've seen enough snow-stained red. I'm not adding another image to that collection. I pressed my lips together. I hated how well he saw through me, how easily he could read parts of me I worked so hard to hide. It made me feel naked, even fully clothed. So what are you going to do? I asked. His gaze drifted to the window, to the city flickering below. Men like him don't change, he said. They just get better at hiding the rot. I'll move some pieces, take away his position, his protection, make it so that when he falls, nobody is surprised. He turned his head back to me. I won't make a spectacle of it. That's my compromise with whatever conscience I have left. That word, conscience, coming from his mouth felt strange, like seeing a pistol wrapped in a child's blanket. He'll know it was because of me, I whispered. He'll hate me even more, and men like him don't just let go. That's why you won't be walking alone, Mateo said simply, and why his hate will be the last thing he owns. The way he said it, so calm, so sure, sent a shiver through me that wasn't entirely fear. The days after that conversation rearranged themselves into a new kind of normal. I moved my things, what little I had, into a small room on the top floor near Mateo's office. Someone had left fresh sheets, a lamp, a decent mirror. There were no locks on the door, but there was always a guard in the hallway now, and strangely, that felt more like a lock than anything metal could. I worked closer to him than I'd ever been to any man in my life. In the morning, I brought him reports. At night, I sat at the desk outside his office, updating ledgers while meetings stretched past midnight. I saw him with his captains, his lieutenants, his drivers. I watched how he listened more than he spoke, how he asked questions that cut through excuses like knives. He was ruthless, there was no pretending otherwise. Once a man tried to hide money in a side account. Mateo didn't raise his voice. He simply slid a piece of paper across the table, explaining in calm, precise detail how the man's family would be taken care of if anything happened to him, and how he would personally make sure his children never lacked for food. Then he ordered the man taken downstairs. He betrayed us, he said when he caught me looking, my expression giving me away. But his children did not. We're not animals. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified by a mercy delivered with that kind of calculation. Still, there were moments that didn't fit the legend of El Lobo. Once, a waitress tripped outside his office, spilling a tray of glasses. The crash made me flinch. Before she could start babbling apologies, cheeks flaming, Mateo bent down and picked up the largest shards himself, rolling up his sleeves without comment. Go get the mop, he told her not unkindly, and wear better shoes next time, these floors are unforgiving. Another afternoon, I watched him through the half-open door as he spoke on the phone, his voice low and strangely gentle. Mamaya, he murmured, I sent the medicine yesterday. Yes, the good one, take it with food, and stop worrying about me, I'm not 16 anymore. A pause, a small smile, Ti quiero tambien. The wolf had a mother he sent medicine to, a mother he told, I love you, in the same mouth that ordered men to their deaths. The dissonance made my head spin. What surprised me the most was that he never tried to touch me again, not the way other men had. No accidental brushes, no hands on my waist under the excuse of guiding me somewhere. The only time his skin met mine was when he passed me a file and our fingers grazed, or when he took a pen from my hand without thinking. Each contact was brief, businesslike, but my body reacted anyway, muscles tensing, breath catching, old alarms screaming from old wounds. One night, after a particularly long meeting, he came out of his office looking more tired than dangerous. His tie was gone, the top buttons of his shirt undone, faint stubble darkening his jaw. There was a line of dried blood along his cuff I hadn't noticed before. Your sleeve, I said before I could stop myself. He glanced down, then shrugged like he was brushing off rain. Not mine. That should have made it easier, it didn't. You're bleeding though, I added, pointing to a small spot near his ribs where the white shirt clung darker to his skin. He followed my gaze, fingers probing the area until he found the tender spot. He hissed through his teeth. Ah, that one is mine, I forgot. How do you forget getting hurt? I asked, unable to keep the disbelief out of my voice. When you're counting other people's wounds, he said, with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes, it gets noisy. I don't know what possessed me, but the next words came out before I could swallow them. Sit, I said, echoing his tone from that first night, softer but firm. You're going to stain everything. His brows rose, clearly surprised. Then slowly he lowered himself into the chair by the window without argument, watching me with open curiosity. I found the small first aid kit in the corner cabinet. I'd catalogued everything in this office on my first week, nerves turning my brain into a camera, and brought it over. My hands shook a little as I snapped it open. You don't have to, he began. I know, I cut in, I'm doing it anyway. I think that was the first time I chose to do something for him, not out of fear or obligation, but out of something I couldn't name yet. Gratitude, maybe, or the simple, stubborn desire to prove to myself that my hands could do something besides count money and hide scars. He watched my face as I worked, not flinching when I unbuttoned his shirt far enough to expose the wound. It wasn't deep, a grazing cut where a bullet had whispered too close, but it bled enough to matter. The skin around it was warm, the muscles under my fingertips tense but still. Up this close I saw other marks on his body, faint white lines crossing his ribs, a circle of old scar tissue near his shoulder, something jagged along his side like a map drawn in pain. I realized, with a strange jolt, that I wasn't the only one in this room carrying history under their clothes. "How did you get this one?" I asked, gently cleaning around the fresh cut. He glanced down. "That knife, 17. A man in Naples thought he could make an example of me in front of his friends." His mouth tightened. He chose the wrong teenager. "And this," I brushed lightly over the circle near his shoulder. "Shot," a tiny smirk. "That one I deserved." "How do you deserve getting shot?" I challenged. "I was arrogant," he said simply. "Thought I couldn't be touched." The bullet disagreed. A small, unwilling smile tugged at my mouth. "At least someone talks back to you." His gaze dropped to my lips, just for a heartbeat, then lifted back to my eyes. Whatever passed across his face in that second made my stomach flip. "I'm not used to being challenged in my own office," he said softly. "It's interesting." Silence settled between us as I taped the bandage in place. My fingers brushed his skin and his breath hitched almost imperceptibly. I told myself it was the sting of the antiseptic, nothing else. When I was done, I sat back, suddenly very aware of how close we were, of the warmth radiating from his body to mine. "Gracias," he said, buttoning his shirt again with careful movements. "You're welcome," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. His hand moved then, almost of its own will, it seemed. He reached out and let his knuckles graze the inside of my wrist, where the edge of my sleeve had ridden up. The touch was feather-light, but it burned like fire when he stopped, eyes fixed on the faint line of a scar there I'd forgotten to hide. "What happened here?" he asked, his voice low. I tensed, instinctively yanking my hand back, tugging the sleeve down. "Kitchen accident," I lied. "Anna," he said, and there was something like disappointment in the way he said my name. "You spent half an hour cleaning my blood. Do you really think I can't tell the difference between a knife slip?" And he trailed off, jaw tightening. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls too close. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Why is it so important to you?" I burst out. "You've known me a month, I'm just your accountant." He studied me, eyes dark and steady. "You are the only person in this building," he said slowly, "who looks at me and doesn't first think of what I can do to them but what I have already done to others." A humorless smile flickered. "You see me too clearly, and yet you still walked over here just now and put your hands on me to help." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice dropping even lower. "I need to know," he said, "all of it, what he did, what they did, what this place did to you. I can't undo it, but I can make sure it stops here with you." His eyes traveled to my sleeves, my high neckline, back to my face. "I can't protect what I can't see." My chest rose and fell too fast. Fear wrestled with something else, an aching, tired longing I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it existed. The desire for someone to look at the worst parts of me and not turn away. The chance, insane and dangerous as it was, to stop pretending my skin was smooth under these layers of fabric. "What are you asking?" I whispered. He held my gaze, no flinch, no rush, just a quiet, relentless certainty. "I'm asking," Mateo said, "for you to trust me enough to show me the truth you've been hiding under that dress." The word hung between us, trust, impossible and tempting. Outside, somewhere far below, a car horn blared and laughter burst from the club, sharp and ugly. Up here, in this too quiet room with a wounded wolf and a girl stitched together by secrets, the world narrowed to a single, trembling choice. My fingers curled into the fabric at my sides, knuckles white. "Mateo," I breathed, not even sure what I was about to say. He didn't move toward me. He just waited, eyes steady, giving me something no one in our world ever gave freely. Time. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what would hurt more, keeping my scars hidden forever, or finally letting someone see every one. Some scars never fade, but they can learn to be kissed instead of feared. If Anna and Mateo's journey touched you, share this story with someone who carries their own hidden wounds, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories from the shadows.